December 29th, 1990. Okay, Dad, if you would need some information on the colors on the public service trolleys.
Basically, they were yellow with
What color yellow? Dark or?
light, medium yellow, I would say, and with a darker yellow, a light brown mixed with the yellow, and a brown trim, basically, and about.
When you say brown, are you meaning kind of a light brown
Well, just
or
on
a
a
dark
molding.
brown?
A medium brown.
Okay.
Around the border of the moldings.
Okay.
Later on, many of the cars were renovated and rebuilt inside. The outer color was maroon and cream.
Okay.
How was that speed?
Good. How about the roof color?
Roof was a gray, a light gray.
How about the underbody, the trucks? Just a darkish?
They were basically a steel color, a gray.
Now you said the mahogany and cream colors. Again, the cream being
Above the windowsill.
above the windowsill.
And the maroon below.
Okay. And how long did they have that color scheme? Did they have other colors prior to that?
No, the only difference was First Line cars were a real dark green. The First Line operated between Newark and Trenton and Camden, but it was necessary to change at Trenton for a car to Camden because of wider gauge tracks.
How much wider were the tracks? And, just a few inches more? Or?
4 or 5 inches, I'd say.
Now we're looking in this 50th anniversary charter book of Amalgamated Transit on page 13, and there are some different trolleys here. Could you start at the top?
Yes, they were a very long car built by public service in the shops in Newark.
Was that an open car?
They were open cars with a running board. When converted to one-man cars, the outside running boards were removed, the sides sealed with a screen, and all of the cross-car benches were cut at the middle for an aisle of, say, 3 feet, so people could go from the front to the rear of the car.
The picture below that is what?
The picture below shows one of the high-speed First Line cars, which could be operated in multiple, as noted by the coupling assembly in the front.
When you say in multiple, how many would they run? Just
2 cars.
And you said their color was different?
It was a very dark green, almost what might be termed a forest green.
Okay. And looking below that, down to the one on the bottom, what can you tell me about that?
Car number 1869 originally operated from Fort Lee to Edgewater in Bergen County. It was an independent company. When public service took the company over, They rebuilt the cars for faster operation and renumbered them from 20 number series to the 1800 series, high 1800s. There were two batches. Some were only 10 windows long and others were 12 windows. The longer ones were kept for use on the Hudson River line also. The numbers ran from 1855 to 1876, I believe. Because many of them were used on the Hudson River line, where the others used on the Hackensack and Newark line did not have a tremendous large passenger necessity.
You said you rode on one of those?
Car number 1869 was one I had ridden on when used as a substitution on the Hackensack-Newark line, visiting my grandparents who lived in Lyndhurst. We lived in Old Union Hill at the time, which is the northern half of Union City at the present time, and we rode the Summit trolley to the transfer station, which bounded West Hoboken, which is the southern half of Union City.
About how long of a trip was that?
30 to the first, most of 2 miles. At the transfer station, which is still known as the transfer station, there we boarded the Passaic car, which ran between Hoboken and Patterson. We rode that car to East Rutherford, where we changed to the Hackensack-Newark car to ride from East Rutherford to Lyndhurst.
Were those all public service?
All public service.
At the height of the public service trolley line, how many trolleys would you say they had?
They had in the neighborhood of 2,800. They operated in all, most of New Jersey except perhaps Sussex County. The Morris County Traction Company was later absorbed by public service. They owned more trolleys than they ever owned in buses.
Let's switch here for a second to the Marker magazine, September 46, with the El Dorado Viaduct on it. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
The El Dorado Viaduct was used to transport farmers' wagons from the top of the Palisades opposite 42nd Street, New York City. It was a horizontal platform out to an elevator where the farmers' wagons were lowered to river level for the purpose of boarding the ferry boats to 42nd or Cortlandt Streets. El Dorado Place is still so named in Weehawken. There was an archway under the East Boulevard where the original elevator assembly met the solid land.
Do you remember seeing that? Or was
No,
it prior to your...
It was just prior, but I was born in 1910, and this was just prior to that, or I was probably too young to know it.
Speaking of the wagons going on the ferries, you had said before about watching some milk wagons. Did you...
The milk trains originated in the Catskills, and the refrigerated cars were transported mainly by the New York, Ontario, and Western Railroad, which covered through that area. The cars were delivered to the Weehawken Ferry Terminal. There, the 40-quart milk cans, which were filled by the farmers, was transferred to huge wagons. These wagons were pulled by teams of at least 6 horses, heavy draft horses as seen on Anheuser-Busch parades. The wagons were very brightly painted.
What colors then?
I believe red. And they were labeled Borden's or Sheffield Farms. The creamery, I believe, was in West 57th Street, Manhattan. And it was a point of interest for ferry passengers to watch the teamster driver, who had a high-perched seat, and to guide this 16-horse fleet from a wide area in the ferry house onto the narrow bridge, floating bridge, which ended at the ferry. Coming off the ferry, it wasn't as big a problem because the horses went from a narrow to a wide area. But going back in the ferry, and nary a scratch was made due to expert maneuvering.
Now, the cans, were the whole wagons taken to the creamery, or just the cans? In other words, were the wagons transported to West 57th Street? Or?
The wagons transported the milk from New Jersey to the creamery.
Okay, the cars came down from the Catskills on the West Shore and were unloaded from there into the wagons, and then, across the river to, and that was Sheffield and Borden's.
They were the predominant creameries at the time. There might have been another one, but they're the ones that I recall.
Go on the markers, same issue, September 46,
sure.
Talking about the Hoboken Elevated Road.
Can you tell me the distance there?
Yeah. It doesn't say. Do you remember that?
Very definitely. Many a trip we had traversed on it, on the Summit or Union Hill car lines. It also saved the Jackson, which was extended from the Hoboken-Lackawanna Terminal to Greenville, section of Jersey City, which was the boundary of Jersey City and Bayonne. The trestle was almost a straight line approach to the Lackawanna Terminal from Palisade Avenue, Jersey City Heights. It seems to me they had a very high safety record, because in my whole lifetime I do not recall of hearing an accident.
You're saying about the doors on the cars?
When there were 2 men operating the cars, there was that added measure of safety. But later, when many double-ended cars were converted to single-man operation, the doors on the left side of the cars were sealed. But later it was decided there was a safety violation, and the rear section of doors on the left side were unsealed with a hand-operated latch in place. In case of emergency, people could get out of the trolley and step on a catwalk, as compared to stepping off the trolley and down into the street far below.
Where did the viaduct end up?
The viaduct ended a short distance from Journal Square, Jersey City, where the Jackson line came down to street level, then entering the Journal Square Terminal and then on to Greenville.
I was thinking you said that went to the Lackawanna Terminal?
The,
That's something else.
the east end of the viaduct ended at the upper level of the Lackawanna Terminal. There were two trolley levels. The Jackson, Union Hill, and Summit operated on the upper level. The Passaic, West New York, Weehawken, and Grove Street lines, which was a local line in Jersey City, all terminated on the lower level.
And during rush hour, was it a busy place?
Extremely busy. The Lackawanna ferries handled a tremendous number of passengers, not only from the trains, but from residents of Hoboken, Union City, and Jersey City.
And about how long were the trolleys operational before buses took over?
About 1937. I started in public service 1942 and drove buses with varied power plants, beginning with a 2-cylinder diesel, 4-cylinder diesel, 6-cylinder diesel, both straight and V6 plus V8.
Are there examples of some of those in this magazine that we get an idea of what?
The basic engine was a 4-cylinder diesel for city operation, 6-cylinder engines, and also the V8 were used on commuting buses. The 2-cylinder engine buses were at a capacity of about 21.
Who made those then?
They were GM.
About what year were those built?
46 or 47, I'll say. Then it was decided to increase the power. The 2-cylinder engines were removed and the 6-cylinder gasoline engine put in. But they had an immediate problem of overheating because somebody forgot to put larger radiators in.
In between the trolleys and buses were the multi-use vehicles?
Yes, public service pioneered to a great extent in all service or trolley buses. Some companies have trolley buses with just electric power. Public service had dual power buses that had a gasoline engine in the rear for local maneuvering. Out of the Union Garage, a large fleet of all service buses operated, and one afternoon, one of the operators, ready to go to work, was assigned a certain bus. He took the bus and got out on the highway with it and was doing business when he had to stop due to a fire, and the fire hoses laid across the street. So it was necessary to detour. So he retracted the poles and hit the starter button, but did not get a response. Upon examination, he found out that there wasn't any auxiliary engine in the rear of the bus. So we're sure there were some unpleasant expressions made. The high majority of public service buses were of GM manufacture. In fact, GM pioneered the use of diesel engines in buses. We did have a fleet of Ford buses which were small and very wide, but they too were underpowered.
How did they, were they hard to drive or maneuver?
I had never driven one, They were usually used in the cities, Newark especially.
And they, I would imagine after the war they were pretty much gone.
Yes.
Okay,
Then,
turning to page in the Amalgamated Transit Union book on page 8, there are some bus pictures
Yeah.
there. How about this top picture?
the top picture shows a four-cylinder white engine-powered bus that carried perhaps 20-25 passengers. Vibration from the four-cylinder engine was not comfortable.
Looks like that was one of the first buses.
Yes. Later on, public service pioneered an electric propelled buses. The engine, originally a Knight sleeve valve engine, powered a generator for powering the rear wheels.
Going down, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Some of the buses had dual drive shafts, or one drive shaft drove each set of wheels.
Going down underneath that, one picture shows a bus picture captioned Elizabeth 1941.
Gas electric. Originally, as I stated, there were Knight and sleeve valve engines. Then later, a twin ignition six-cylinder engine, very similar to those that powered the Greyhound buses of the 1930 vintage. They were a very efficient engine, except those used in generating electricity. The fact that the engine was revolving at top speed just about all the time caused a overheat problem. They rode with the hoods open, and the exhaust manifolds were always pink in color from being so hot.
So they rode with their hoods open, just a couple inches, just to get air in, or all the way open? Or?
The side panels of the hoods were open to keep weather out.
Let's see. These pictures on the bottom of page 8, is that basically the same bus?
Basically, body the same, only a larger engine.
Let's see. Is that an improvement then?
Yes. As I say, that gas engine was the standard engine for many years.
Moving along to page 10 in the same book, indication on the top of the page that these trolleys, such as number 148, only had 2 motors rather than 4?
Yes, they had double trucks, but one set of wheels on each truck were large, which were the power wheels, and the small wheels were pony wheels. They were a low-speed unit, and New York City especially had a huge fleet of so-called power trolleys. Later on, many of the cars that operated in Camden had similar power, but they were renovated, and 4 motor trucks were installed in their places for higher speed and more comfortable riding.
On page 11, there's a picture of again, an all-service bus used on charters to the World's Fair.
During the World's Fair and
It's 39 World's Fair.
39 World's Fair, many of the buses, due to the fact they were dual powered, were used for charter trips from the Newark area or Hudson County area to the World's Fair. They rode, of course, with the poles down and powered by the auxiliary engine. Those buses seated in the neighborhood of 50 passengers.
Pre-air conditioned days.
Definitely pre-air conditioned days. They used Model 60. Try to drive 60 miles an hour and open all windows. the all service buses had a fall which did not prove itself until later. They were extremely quiet, and people with bad eyesight and hearing problems did not hear them coming and caused accidents. Also, operators had to be extremely careful when proceeding through a multi-overhead assortment of wires, because if the poles jumped, they caused a great deal of electric wire damage.
Notice a couple different types of, what do you call them, cow catchers or whatever,
Yeah.
or pilots on the front of these.
Cow catchers here.
For instance, on the type of this, from the marker March 1957, that type with the many metal prongs on it, is that the early type?
The early type trolleys had cow catchers to prevent especially animals from being forced under the front of the car and being injured or a fatality due to the wheels.
I imagine when trolleys first came out, there were problems with horses being scared by them, and
That's why I stated that especially cars operating in the outlying areas through farms and wooded areas to prevent damage and injury to both animals and passengers.
later on they seem to go to a more modern type of just kind of a guide in the front, it looks like.
Later on, a gate type operation was installed on the front of the trolley cars. If the trolley met an obstruction, this gate would move inward, and immediately a wooden scoop would drop down, which was located between this gate and the front wheels.
I notice in this one markers 1957 again, a picture of the public service trolley in a safety color.
Yeah.
What color was that?
That was the Bernie cars were the same yellow combination as the freight cars. They were four-wheel, steel, wooden benches, were only useful in short city trips. They were slow and noisy due to the gears.
Did they operate mainly just in the cities?
Yes, short trips in the city. They were that was just before buses were instituted.
Again, you said was the standard. This was a yellow color,
Yes.
the same color as the other yellow.
Same basic yellow color as public service cars.
But what color were the doors?
The doors were of red color,
Kind of a dark red or
Uh,
not bright red, or
similar to a Tuscan red.
okay. And around the windows, that would have been the same color.
Yes,
Okay. I see they had two
they were.
trolley poles.
Yeah, they were all equipped with. Well, I say most of them were equipped with two trolley poles, one on each end, to avoid having the motorman walk around the car, pulling the pole down and replacing it, especially in a heavy traffic area.
Did they
When they change direction.
did they change that then from inside the car?
No, the motorman had to get outside of the car and pull it around. And with the two poles, all he had to do was pull one pole down and raise the other one.
And you had mentioned earlier about the clocks inside the
On
cars.
the suburban routes, it was necessary to collect additional fares due to a zone operation. Two-man cars did not lose any time due to the multi-fare collection, because the conductor walk through the cars collecting fares of people that went from one zone to another. In collecting the fares, he operated a pull cord. Also, some had an iron bar with strap handles which operated a clock indicating a cash fare collected, or operating in the opposite direction, a ticket fare, due to school children using school tickets.
Other than the Newark City subway, which is still operational, what were some of the last runs that they had?
The Hudson River Line, which was most profitable, which extended from Edgewater to Patterson, and one of the about the biggest customer was Palisade Amusement Park, which was located just on top of the hill from the 130th Street Ferry Terminal. Later on, the ferry in New York terminal was changed from 130 to 125th Street, and for most of its life was known as the 125th Street Ferry. It might be interesting to note that most of the amusement parks were financed by trolley company money. Most notable, Palisade Amusement Park, which extended across the boundaries of Fort Lee and Cliffside Park, and Willow Grove, north of Philadelphia.
Were there other trolley companies in North Jersey, or?
Yes, there were. The two noted: North Jersey Transit, which operated over public service trolley tracks from what was then known East Patterson to the Patterson Terminal at the end of Broadway, and the Morris County Traction Company, which operated in Morris County, principally Morristown, and it terminated in Elizabeth with an agreement using public service tracks.
How about in the winter, if there was heavy snowfall? Did that cause problems?
The only streets open were streets where trolley tracks existed, because the trolley companies did not lose much time in sending their snow plows out. And of course, many times farmers' wagon wheels got caught in the tracks, causing service disruption.
Were there storms so bad that even the trolleys couldn't run, or was it?
Not very often, because that was the only means of transportation other than horses and wagons. And during sleet storms, it was easy to trace the trolley's travels in the outlying areas due to the sparking of the ice on the trolley wire.
Moving to the marker of November 1952, you had said about some of the changes they had made in those trolleys. There's two pictures.
The Camden area had a fleet of, say, 10-window cars, which were converted into a longer car by cutting them apart and splicing the two ends together, which created a very long interurban type trolley.
How were the trolley wires suspended? Were there separate trolley poles along the street?
In some cases, in heavy populated areas, there were individual steel poles supporting the trolley wire span, but in most cases existing utility poles, both telephone or public service. Joint operated poles were financed by both companies with their own arrangement.
For instance, with the viaduct down to the Lackawanna terminal, were the poles on both sides and a wire suspended, or
Right.
or rather than just one pole along
No,
one
it
side
was-
with wire?
There was on the viaducts, there were usually two poles, one on each side of the tracks to hold the cross suspension. On trips down to the ferry houses, especially on the east side of the Palisades, there was known as a sand switch. The trolley had to come to a stop, and the conductor would operate a switch which would direct the trolley onto the tracks properly. If the trolley did not stop, the automatic switch would send the trolley on a very close adjacent track through sand, stopping the trolley.
Did they use those? Were there reasons to do so? Were there instances where they had to do that you're aware of?
They had to, because if the trolley didn't stop, it would go on a sand track.
What I meant was, did that in fact happen? Was that unusual if it happened?
Well, at that time when they were in use, I was at a very young age, but I did not know of any, but later on I realized the purpose. And also, when they came to a grade crossing, a railroad, again, the trolley had to come to a stop. Otherwise, the derail would be in use.
You had mentioned about the area now occupied by Giant Stadium in East Rutherford. There used to be the Halfway House.
That's right. Very adjacent to the present Meadowlands was an inn known as the Halfway House, which was theoretically halfway between Hoboken and Patterson. There was a picnic grove there. And on Sundays, mainly immigrants who had landed in Hoboken and Jersey City, because that's where the ships from Europe unloaded the passengers. The people lived there for a while, and then they needed amusement, so they took a trolley ride, which was very inexpensive. Firemen had their own trolley picnics and chartered 3, 4, or 5 trolley cars. The families had a day in the country, so to speak. At this Halfway House in what was known as Moonachie at that time was one of these picnic groves, and at nighttime a couple of so-called sharpies would board the trolley, and they'd select some hard-working father who might have imbibed a little bit, and they proceeded to sell the trolley car to this so-called innocent passenger. Of course, they disappeared. After the deal, they disappeared at the next stop, and Public Service sold a trolley car that they didn't know anything about. Of course, the deal was never consummated legally.
How much would a fare like that cost from to, for instance, the Halfway House?
The fare, the continued fare from Hoboken to Patterson was 35 cents. The fare was predicated on nickel per zone.
On, say, for instance, the viaduct that you talked about, how much did it cost to ride from the Lackawanna terminal, say, up to the top of the hill?
Usually, in multi-zones, the fare limit was at a boundary of 2 towns, because the trolley company had to pay a tax in each town, predicated on their receipts.
How much did it cost, though? Was it like 10 cents to ride?
Usually it was 5 cents within a large town's limits,
Okay, so
or city limits.
So it may have been a nickel or a dime to ride from the ferry house up to the top of the hill.
That's right. Or from Lackawanna Terminal to the transfer station, which was the boundary line of Jersey City and Union City. I mentioned collecting the so-called second fare. Say a person got on in zone number 1, it was pay as you enter. As they approached zone 2, it was pay as you leave system. When they approached zone 3, it was pay enter again. So the fare would be collected between zone 2 and zone 3. The fact the passenger rode from 2 into 3, he did not get off, therefore, so the conductor had to collect the nickel from that zone plus the nickel of the zone he's entering. So in other words, a passenger would pay 10 cents. I mentioned the fast line, which operated from Newark to Trenton, and where people had to transfer to another trolley to continue to Camden because of the wide gauge rails. The fast line was operated by a company known as the Public Service Railroad Company, which was a theoretical division of public service. It was so called because it operated on modified railroad conditions. In fact, also, my aunt worked in the ticket office that just in the public service terminal in Newark, which just handled the tickets for the fast line. At Bonhamton, which is west of Perth Amboy, there was a junction, and some of the cars only went as far as Perth Amboy from Newark. The line operated on street level in Newark and Elizabeth, and then went private right-of-way at an area known as Bayway. Also, street level operations in Trenton. Otherwise, it was all private right-of-way with conventional railroad signals. The fast line cars were very fast cars with top speeds in the neighborhood of 60 miles an hour, and were equipped with air whistles, as well as dual railroad marking lamps, and of course a searchlight, rather headlight, auxiliary headlight for nighttime operation.
They were replaced by buses?
Yes, as time went on, they were replaced by buses. The fact the fast line was parallel to the Penn Railroad, which operated between Trenton and Newark at higher speeds.
This completes this side. We're going to side 2.